want to forget, throw them in the chat box. And then you might notice there's two of me. One of them is my phone that's tracking the chat box. I may answer the question right away if it makes sense. Otherwise, I'll hold on to it till the end, but then you can at least like type it out and not forget it. But on that note, good old share screen, just 1 second. Okay, so you should have, okay, there we go. A start to Europe by train. And so this is the trip that I took with my then fiance, now husband, through Europe, a big chunk of Central Europe, over Christmas and New Year's of last year. It was our last like big hurrah. Little did we know that we wouldn't be going back anytime soon. We planned it out as let's see a bunch of little different places, and then so we know what we want to come back to and spend more time at. And we took a train for the entire, like our only mode of transportation was train. A variety of different types of trains. And the whole point of this is we had, for one, that is my husband and I, his name's Rob. When I reference Rob, it's that dude right there. But we have taken a train trip out to Nevada and Lake Tahoe, and we did like an overnight train with Amtrak, and that was a fun experience, and we enjoyed that. So we're like, let's take this to the next level and spend 2 weeks in Europe using just trains. I personally have spent a fair amount of time in Europe and am experienced using the train system and know that it's significantly different than what is in the States, which really helped to make this a decision and part of our planning process. Our plan was to spend short stops in big cities, like just like quick overviews of the bigger cities, and then any multi-night stays were in smaller towns for more of the like small town feel and going beyond the big buildings and busy areas. It is really easy to cross country borders. It is really easy to change languages and to truly change cultures when you're on a train. You don't really notice that you've crossed a border unless the announcements like suddenly become a different language you weren't prepared for. And also it we got to do a lot of moving. You'll see a map in a second of all the places, like kind of like a visual of how much ground we covered. We had to do all that movement while still, you know, having like time to do things and free time, and like our transportation time wasn't stressful. Our transportation time was easy and fun. We got to hang out together. We played a lot of games together. I did a lot of crocheting. And also it just sounded cool. Like, yeah, I took a train around Europe. It's almost as cool as backpacking around Europe, but takes far less physical effort. And we took night trains, and I was really looking forward to using night trains to compare European night trains to Amtrak night trains. So that's why we were on a train. And then this is what we did. We had 14 days. We visited 7 countries. And I count like the United Kingdom. We flew in and out of London. We spent like, I don't know, maybe 36 hours in London total. So like I still count it as a country we visited. So that's where that number comes from. A total of 12 cities and towns that we actually physically spent time in. We were on 2 different night trains, and we spent time at 2 different ski resorts. Skiing, we snowboard, but like that wasn't really our priority, but we wanted to give it a go. And we did not bring our own gear, so we didn't want to spend a ton of time renting gear and all that fun stuff. But this is a little numbers breakdown, and then here's a map of what we did. I have all of the cities and everything listed as well. But this is the ground that we covered over the course of 2 weeks. It says about 3,000 miles if you were to drive it all, but I'm sure trains go in other zigzaggy ways and got a bunch of different stuff. But this is just a quick visual of what we did. And then these are the cities that we spent time in. Yeah, there's a big long list of places that we went to. Some of them are easily recognized, like London and Vienna. And then other ones are small little towns with only markets. And I say that because that made it interesting when you think about the fact that Europe takes its holidays much more seriously than the United States does, and tiny towns with only markets over a big holiday time period results in lots of places being closed. We were prepared for this and lived off of granola bars sometimes, but yeah, this is kind of a quick breakdown of what we did. I'm going to go into some detail on each place that we were at. I'm also definitely going to pronounce things incorrectly. My apologies, but the words are spelled out, so I got that spelling right. So we're going to jump right into the first place we went. It was Dinant, Belgium. We flew, so to get there, I should start out by saying that we flew into London, and from London we went directly to Dinant. And we did this 100% by train. Not necessarily to stick with the we're going by train the whole way mindset, but because taking the Eurostar under the English Channel was just, it was much easier logistically and financially than taking flights into Europe. So that was our choice. And flying from Denver to London via United is both affordable and pretty quick. Back when flights were a thing that we did regularly. So Dinant is actually much closer to France than I was prepared for, and this becomes an important feature shortly. And it is known for the Citadel as well as the Church of Notre Dame de Dinant, and you can see both of them here in this picture. The up on top of that cliff is the Citadel, and then the church is kind of shadowed to the right. A lot of the towns we ended up arriving in after dark, not necessarily that late in the day, but it's the middle of the winter, so dark shows up at like 4:30. And so we would arrive with all the Christmas lights and everything all lit up, and then we would go to bed and we wake up in the morning, and then it would be like a whole different town. So we got to see two different versions without putting much effort into it, which was great. This is a town that I wish, looking back at it, is a town that I would definitely want to spend more time in. It's a really small town. The downtown area is really cute to just roam around in. But let's see, I think I have more photos. Yeah, this is what it looked like when we arrived. We had to walk across the bridge. We were less than 5 minutes away from the train station, was where we were staying. And then this was the next morning. So one thing I did notice, and I really noticed it when I was going through all these photos, is that we were there in the winter and it was cold as if it was winter, but it was definitely kind of like the Denver/Western Slopes version of winter, where brown is your primary color, whereas here in Summit we're used to like white being our primary color. So definitely a lot of the days and a lot of the pictures that I took, I feel like I'm, for one, definitely not a travel photographer, but also everything felt like darker and browner than it felt in real life. But this is the Citadel up on the top, you can see, and then the church there. You can actually hike up to the Citadel. It was not on our agenda originally, but then we had checked out of our, we stayed in an Airbnb. We checked out of our little rental house and went to go catch the train, only to find out that the train was canceled because all of France was on strike. And so we had intentionally avoided France because we knew France was in the process of striking for trains and public transportation. We knew that was an issue, so we avoided France. However, we didn't take into consideration that trains leaving France would also be canceled for the rest of their destination. So our train was canceled, so we ended up having a couple extra hours that we could have definitely gone up and done more touring in the area, but we checked out of our accommodations, so we had to carry all our luggage. So we just did the second best thing, and we ate a whole bunch of food and just hung out close to town. But that was our first stop and our first little introduction. This was the first time I had taken my husband abroad with me. We had done like a van trip in Iceland, but this was our first big, like, we're going to speak multiple languages, it's going to be really complicated trip. So I was definitely stressed out about the details. He was just along for the ride and the food. So I think it started out much less stressful for him, but like the first day of like truly being in Europe, I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, this perfectly planned trip is already screwed up because I forgot about the fact that trains, leave France. And if they're not working in France, they're not gonna work outside of France. But that's neither here nor there. Our next stop was Offenburg, Germany. So we basically took the train we went into Brussels. We had our new train route took us into Brussels. We had like a short layover. I don't know if they call that with training. I'll just call it layover. We had a short layover in Brussels, and just enough time to like leave the train station, get lunch, and then carry on. And we went over to Germany. Offenburg is in the Black Forest, and it's also very close to France. But luckily the trains were coming from Belgium and Switzerland, so that was like not an issue there. Our plan was to arrive in Offenburg a bit earlier so that we could do some more like outdoor stuff, but we got there pretty late with all the train cancellations. And so the one thing I would do if I could do this again was spend more time in the Black Forest side of things, along the Rhine River, either by boat or by scenic train. Those just were thwarted by our very first day of things going wrong. So that said, I have no epic photos, brown or otherwise, of Offenburg because we were there at night and then our next train left early in the morning. It was needless to say, our trip did not start out as leisurely and relaxing as I made it sound, but it gets better. Our next stop was Grian, Switzerland. Grian was our destination. If you were around for my Croatia story a couple of years ago, Grian was my home base. Grian is quote unquote my summer home. This was before COVID came in and kept me in Summit County for the summer, as well as the place that I would go and stay was a chalet that I got to know through a volunteer exchange, and COVID has actually shut them down. So like Grian is in my heart as my summer home, but probably will never be my physical summer home again. But we did go there with the intent of spending Christmas with the friends that we had in the area, and we wanted to go snowboarding. I really wanted to go spend some time on the snow in the mountains that I was very familiar with from summer trips. Obviously, if I had the opportunity to go back, I would spend significantly more time in Grian just because it's my happy place. But we didn't get to do that. So here's a few pieces of this is coming into Grian. Grian's up in those mountains from the train. This was our snowboarding experience at the resort. It's a smaller resort. I would probably compare it to like Eldora, and especially since it's only 3,600 feet up. Granted, 3,600 feet in the Swiss Alps is actually pretty high. But we left the place we were staying, which was a short train ride away from this area, and it was raining. So the gear that I took was like a puffy jacket and then a rain jacket to use as like my soft shell. And I've never been more thankful to have a legitimate rain jacket because we were getting on the train. It was actively raining, not sprinkling, like legit rain. And then we get up into the mountain, and this is snow, but this is like, if snowdrops were a thing, these would be snowdrops. It was very, very wet. And this was our epic views of the mountains that I wanted to spend time in. This is not the first time Switzerland has done this to me. Switzerland really likes to have heavy cloud cover on days when I would prefer to have views. But we actually had a lot of really good snow once we got up in the mountain. And this is what it looked like the next day, the day that we decided we weren't going to go snowboarding. It was beautiful and sunny, and there were views for days. So we, with this area, you can take the train up to the base of the ski resort, and then it's like the middle base area. And you can go to the cafes and just hang out. So we actually went up and just in snow boots, not with our snowboards, went up and like checked out the resort from the perspective of if we were snowboarding that day, we would have seen this. So this is proof that sometimes it is actually sunny and you do have views in Switzerland. But after Switzerland, we were there for a couple of days, like I said, spending time with friends. And so we had Christmas Eve and Christmas Day in Switzerland. We had Christmas dinner up on the mountain, and it was just like we spent a lot of time. We didn't do a lot outside of our little bubble because we'd already spent time there in the past, and also our trip didn't start out the way it was supposed to. So we used Grian as our excuse to kind of like, okay, let's like regroup. Everything, like the first 2 days were chaos and not what I wanted, not what they're supposed to be. So like, let's just like chill and be calm and like truly be on vacation and hang out by a fire and read books and drink wine and like be lazy for a couple of days in Switzerland. And that's what we did. And it was exactly what, maybe not but it was like what I needed to like pick up where we left off with the let's enjoy trains part of the trip. Which here's more of Grian. This is from the chalet that we were staying in. Proof that there are indeed mountains and that it was raining because everything's wet. But the next stop was Austria. I think this is Schruns, probably with a German accent would make it sound better. This is a little bit lower than Grian, and it's the Montafon Valley. They have, one thing I did learn real quickly when planning this trip is that ski resorts in Europe are, especially the smaller ones, are much more complicated than the ones that we're used to here in the States. I'm like, oh, well, you just like show up in one location and then you get on the lift and then you go, right? No, there's like this is a small town. It has less than 20,000 people in it. And there are probably 6 different access points to the same ski resort. And they're just like, behind this parking garage, there's an access point. Oh, and over here is where you get your rentals. And then you just walk around the building, then there's a lift. And it was like not at all what I expected in the planning process. So that was a little bit complicated. But we were able to rent gear and get a lift ticket. And the one thing that I did really appreciate about all this is that like your daily lift tickets were less than $50 when converted back, and even just like in local currency, significantly less expensive than what we would have paid to like do a trip like this in the States where we bounce between ski resorts. So that made it worth it. That made paying for rentals totally worth it. We learned in this town that we were in the week between Christmas and New Year's, so we're like, oh, we'll probably be okay. Like a lot of stuff isn't going to be closed. Yeah, we were wrong. They had like really weird hours for when restaurants were open, and like the places that were open, there weren't that many of them, so the reservations were required. So needless to say, I definitely made rosti, which is essentially hash browns. Definitely made that and ate it in the bed of our, like just sitting on the bed of our Airbnb, because we like assumed restaurants would be open and realized that this is small town Europe, that's not how it works. And we got smarter for the rest of the trip, sort of. But here's some more from Austria. Oh, and in this picture here in the dark, you can see like those Alps that you're looking at are actually Swiss Alps. Grion is on the western side of Switzerland. Austria is obviously like the eastern border. But we went up from Grion, we went down through Zurich and everything, and came around and basically went back up a valley that gave us a town in Austria with a view of the Swiss Alps, which was kind of cool. But this is the snowboarding conditions we had at the resorts. Groomers aren't really a thing, at least not in this particular area. We didn't really have any groomers. Instead, we had like a foot of snow, which was great. It was actually a lot of fun. And they had tunnels going through the mountain to get from like one side of the mountain to other. Like how these resorts were interwoven was just impressive, and pretty complicated, but we worked it out. That said, we did at one point want to get up to the highest peak just to see it and say we were there. And it's called the Panorama Lift, and this was the view that we got. That was one other thing that we very quickly learned about the Alps in the wintertime, is that you can have great snow and like relatively clear days at one level of the mountain. You go a little higher and you have whiteout conditions. And this, like, we're going Black Diamonds to get out of here. So that was like a little nerve-wracking. You can't see anything. And they don't just like drop down a cliff. They like do switchbacks down the cliff. It was interesting, to say the least. But then down at the bottom in the town, it was just rain. So we got all the weather climates in one day. And again, so thankful that I had a legitimate rain jacket, not just a soft shell. But that was our 3 days in Austria, 2 days, 2 nights, 3 days. And then we carried on to Vienna. So getting through from Austria, our next destination was Poland. So we had to go through Vienna to switch trains over to a bigger train. And our first night train in Vienna, we only had a couple of hours basically to get dinner, and we just roamed the streets of Vienna. It was actually, there were a lot of very recognizable brands on this very international European looking street. And then of course it was between Christmas and New Year's, so it was incredibly busy. Just looking back at these pictures and being like, oh, we stood so close to people, and like everything could be so busy. It was very nostalgic, to say the least. But so from Vienna, our next stop was Krakow, Poland. And we did this on a night train. We got on the train in Vienna and got onto a night train. And at the end of this, I have more details on like the train specifics as well. But we had a sleeper compartment, and we got on the train at like 10 p.m. and got off the train at about 7 a.m. and arrived in Poland. We're like, okay, cool, we're in Poland, except for turns out at 7 a.m. the train station is open, but like nothing else is. So we got to spend some quality time in the train station. We got to enjoy some McDonald's. It was European McDonald's that I had to do currency exchange to acquire, so it felt, vacation-y enough. Poland's actually, not Poland, well, Poland as well, but Krakow is actually a really complicated city. It goes back to the 7th century, which is, even for Europe, a very old city. And they have different parts of the town look very different and have very different styles. And we spent our time in Krakow. We were there for 2 days. We spent our time doing the day trip to Auschwitz and just like kind of local exploring. One thing I would definitely go back to Krakow. I believe Warsaw would also definitely be on my list for Poland, and spend some time in the cities and like really paying attention to like the very complex and overlapping history and just like how the city is broken up and how it got to be that way. Just planning this and knowing that we didn't really have a ton of time. This is one area that I would definitely want to come back to. There are other cities that I'm like, yeah, whatever. Like Vienna, I have been in that city before, and I'm by no means saying it doesn't have interesting things and things to do, but on a personal level, like the Krakow, Warsaw, Poland history is just like more interesting to me than the Vienna side of things. So that's neither here nor there, but this is one of the areas that I would have liked to spend more time in. But we did get to roam around a little bit. For a big city, it definitely had, since it was broken up into such, I don't know if they're called districts, but if you visualize them as districts, you could like, it felt like a bunch of small areas put together for a big city. We also did a day trip to Auschwitz. And we did a day trip with a tour through a tour company. And again, many times throughout this, I will mention that doing this over the holidays was good and bad. And one of the bad sides of it was that we were kind of limited in what our tour options were. So we took what we could get, and that's fine. It was a really, really interesting and like heart-wrenching experience, but it was also busy and really rushed. I would have liked to have like chosen a less busy time to go and with more tour options, but we did tour Auschwitz. And these are literally the only 2 photos we took. It was much more of an experience to just like be present than to photograph. So, but yeah, I'm really glad we went. I've been to Dachau in Germany, and that one was another one where it's just like, I don't know, I'm not, obviously don't want these places to exist, but they do, and going and visiting them and seeing what they're really all about, it's definitely worth a trip. But this was our Poland, and this was the draw to Poland. We went to Poland to go to Auschwitz. Krakow was the closest big city, and knowing that we could come back to the big city and like see all the other things, is like, no, we're going to focus on the fact like we need to go to Auschwitz because that's what we want to see while we're here. That's one of those things that you can't just like, if you're with a group of people, like it's just one thing that I wanted to do by ourselves or by myself. But from Poland, we got on another night train. So we did night train and overnight in our accommodations, and then another night train, which made for interesting sleep patterns. But our night train took us from Krakow to Prague, and this particular train started in Warsaw and went to Prague, so most people on the sleeper car had an extra like 2 hours of sleep. Would definitely recommend that version. So we got on at like, I don't know, 11:30 and got off at 7. And so we had time in Prague. We've been to Prague before, so we kind of knew what we were in for, so we didn't schedule very much time in Prague, and Prague was mostly just a train changing stop. So we did do a lot of walking around in Prague. We got breakfast. We got, I can't remember the name of them, but they're pastry rolls baked over a like charcoal fire filled with chocolate. I distinctively remember that. So yeah, in Prague in general is another really big city. It has a very complex political history, and obviously like the Czech Republic has changed names. It's another one where if you're a history buff and you're into that kind of stuff, it'd be very interesting. I am terrible with dates and can't remember like years and things like that. History was not my class. The stories behind it is interesting, but like the actual like historical facts kind of are going in one ear and out the other. But I think it would be really interesting to do like a walking tour, a pretty in-depth walking tour of Prague, probably one that you would pay for in advance, just to get like the full details. But yeah, we just had a half a day there because we were changing trains to get to Quedlinburg, I believe is how you pronounce that, Germany. This is in the Harz Mountains. This was a destination. We chose this destination because of trains. There is a Harz scenic train that goes up into the mountains, and it's like a steam train, and you get up into the steam cog train. You get up into the mountains, and you actually like summit one of the mountains by train, and that was on our agenda. And then we ended up, I don't remember why we ended up vetoing it. I think it was a timing thing. It wasn't that we didn't have enough time there. It's that the train was in the area. It left really, really early and was like a really long endeavor. And we just had decided that we would rather than get up to alarm clocks, we wanted to treat it more like a vacation. So we just roamed through Quedlinburg. It has a lot of, well, here, let's look at pictures. They have timber framed buildings. This is when we arrived, once again at night. And then like all the buildings looked kind of like this. It had a very quaint look to it. It looked like Quedlinburg has a look. I don't know that Europe has HOAs, but if they did, like this HOA would have very, very particular regulations. And it just had that look. It was a lot of fun, and to just like roam around and stop at cafes and get a coffee and then get a snack here. And that's what we did. We treated it more like a vacation. I think this was the 30th of December by the time we were here. So we just gave ourselves some downtime rather than the trains into the Harz Mountains. And honestly, this time we had blue skies, but considering the luck that I've had in the past with planning for weather and summits, I was like, whatever, it's fine. So of course, since we didn't plan to go up to the top of a mountain, it didn't rain or snow or have clouds. So everyone who did get to see the top of those mountains, you're welcome. And so from Quedlinburg, we got on another train and went to Frankfurt. So Frankfurt's one of those big cities that, for the sake of being Frankfurt, I probably would never visit. And this has a lot more to do with me and how I prefer to travel. I like the little towns where I can go out and be outdoors and like out of the city and on trails. And that's just like how I prefer to travel. Frankfurt is none of those things. It is a financial hub. It is a very big city. It's pretty spread out. It is around a river, but that's not really outside in the way that I want to be. We arrived on New Year's Eve, and we were told that the best place to see the New Year's Eve celebrations is from, I believe it's called the Romer, and it is a square on the Main, which is the river. However, if you are not prepared to deal with rowdy people, don't go. And I'm like, we decided we're fine. We can handle rowdy people. It's okay. We're going to go check it out. Little did we know. We were fine. Everything was fine. The people weren't that bad. There was no time when I was like, oh, you all are too rowdy. I was just like, oh, this is how Germans celebrate. Like, good to know. So we did go out on New Year's Eve. We got there, and we went out for New Year's Eve celebration, and they had fireworks. And being from the United States, especially now in Summit County, when like fireworks are usually banned or canceled or whatever, I'm used to like, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes of fireworks and then it's over. These New Year's Eve fireworks started at about 9 p.m. and they went until 2 a.m. And not a single one of them was set off by an official person. They were all just individual people with lighters, usually lighters and beer, sometimes like 5-year-olds and lighters and fireworks. And it was an insane experience. I have video of it. Hopefully it plays. It may or may not have sound. The sound isn't really that important. Just to like see what it is, but along the river, let me see what's next. So I'll show you the video in just a second, but like on the river, there were boat cruises that were out there for New Year's Eve dinner, and the people with the fireworks, they had like the Roman candles, and they were shooting them at the boats, and the people on the boats would cheer when it hit the boats. It was just like the things that were happening in Frankfurt on New Year's Eve were things that like would have never been even remotely acceptable anywhere in the United States. And this is probably, like I said, I never would have gone to Frankfurt outside of this. But this was an experience, to say the least. And there were kids setting off Roman candles and like actual like legit fireworks, like in the trees there's legit fireworks. We watched, there were police all around in riot gear, but they were just like standing off on the side. We did see a kid light a firework, and then it tipped over when he ran away, and it like shot into these 4 police horses. Like, oh great, the horses like didn't even bat an eye, even though fireworks were going off underneath of them. And the guy, one of the police officers, got off and like talked to the kid. I obviously don't speak German, and it was really loud, so I didn't hear anything. But the kid basically like was told, it appeared that it was like, oh well, don't shoot it at the horses, because 2 seconds later the cop was gone, you know, still nearby, but like not paying attention to the kid anymore. And the kid was like lighting off his fireworks again, just like making sure they didn't hit the horses. So yeah, it was an experience. Let's see if I can make this video work. And I don't think it has sound, because I think this might be a time lapse. Oh, it has sound. Okay. Okay, so that is, I think this was at midnight, but this is what it, well, this is probably right after midnight, because at midnight we were busy doing time lapses. But this is what this river looked like, sort of like between 9 and, well, probably 9 and about 12:30. And then you could still hear fireworks going off until 2 in the morning. But that is what it was. It blew my mind. I was not prepared for it. Totally worth it, not prepared for it. And then this is kind of what it looked like after all the midnight fireworks had gone off. These are all the people going back into the square. We like went toward the square and then changed our minds. It felt a little apocalyptic. You can see up on the bridge, there's just hordes of people on the bridge. All of this to say that we're surrounded by people who are drinking, who have fireworks, who have lighters. There's no regulations. The fireworks are going every which direction. And not once did I feel unsafe. Like I never felt like, oh, I'm definitely going to get my eye shot out. It was just like a really crazy experience. And then this is walking home, or walking back to the hotel we were staying in. It felt very apocalyptic. There were still fireworks going off in the street, some of the smoke bombs. People would cross the street, like they would have crosswalk. The street's open, there's traffic on the street. But they'd cross the street and then they get to the median and they'd like set off a firework, set it down and leave. So you're like in your car, you'd see people like they stop at the stoplight in their car and there's fireworks going off right next to them. It was just like a mind-blowing experience. It was really cool. So glad we got to see it. If you want a little bit of crazy for your New Year's Eve celebration, I would recommend Frankfurt. If you want it to be mellow and peaceful, well, Quedlinburg looked like they had some great live music. It was very different worlds. And needless to say, after staying up until like 2 or 3 in the morning to soak up all of the crazy that was the New Year's Eve celebration, we spent New Year's Day doing absolutely nothing except for going out to find food. And this was kind of wrapping up our trip. We had to be back to the States and back to work. So we did have, from Frankfurt, we went to Brussels. We spent a full day in Brussels. And it was, so this would have been the 2nd of January. So the New Year's Eve, Christmas celebrations were technically kind of over, but it was definitely still a lot of people traveling. It was really busy. All of their Christmas markets were still open. And we went out and we saw stuff and we did things. It's a big city and we were kind of a little bit overwhelmed. I was looking at this thinking that like, oh yeah, by the time we get to Brussels, we're going to be exhausted. So we're not going to want to do a whole bunch. Turns out having January 1st as a completely lull day gave us a second wind when we got to Brussels, and I just didn't have enough stuff planned and researched, so we just kind of roamed. We ate a lot of chocolate and we ate a lot of waffles. and roamed Brussels. I don't think I have any more pictures of Brussels. I didn't take a lot of pictures in the city. Yeah, I didn't get any other pictures of Brussels. So that is, from here, we took the Eurostar back to London. And like I said, we spent about 36 hours in London. In the past, we've spent a fair bit of time in the United Kingdom. So we kind of knew, we did what we knew in London in terms of like where to go get food and just kind of walk some of the main sites. We didn't do a whole lot in London, so I didn't include that here. Also, I took no photos of it. I don't know why. I definitely took this trip and did not photograph like I was going to tell the story later. But on that note, these are the places we went to. This is kind of what we saw. It was a mix of the big cities and the little towns. We spent more time in the little towns. I have more warm, fuzzy feelings about the little towns, and could go on forever about them. However, I did definitely want to leave time for questions, and I want to talk about the trains themselves, because this was specifically a train trip. I did not include a bunch of pictures of the trains because honestly, I didn't take that many of them. Most of them were selfies of us on the train and what we were doing. We spent a lot of time on the train. I think we can get to that in a second. But for night trains, we took 2 night trains. They were both run by different companies. I probably should have looked this up because I can't remember what the companies are. If you are interested, I can follow up after this with the names of the train companies and like how that process worked. They did have to be booked in advance, and you needed to know like your time periods and exactly what you wanted in advance. This was different for the night trains. Every other train we took, we had the Euro pass, so we could kind of like get on whatever train. We didn't have to have a specific schedule. So that was like a great part of trains in general. Except for the night trains, you had to book in advance and you had to know exactly what you wanted. And they all have their own payment process. Some of them you had to like go to these random locations. The one in Poland, we had to go to a random location to get a physical ticket. Like there was no electronic ticket. You had to have your physical ticket. And after living in a world of digital, I was like, okay, cool, whatever, we can go pick up this ticket. And then I had the ticket in hand. I was like, oh my God, I'm definitely going to lose this. I'm so used to having like, oh, I'll just look it up on my phone, or I'll like pull it up in my email on some other thing. But having a physical ticket and like I couldn't lose my ticket, and it's been so long since that's been the responsibility. That part was a little bit stressful. But generally, night trains are a really cool experience. They're very small. You definitely don't have a lot of room in the night trains. And I've got some video to kind of really show it. The one recommendation I have is to choose the destinations that are furthest apart. If we had done like Warsaw to Prague, we would have had like a 9-hour night. Instead, we had a 7-hour night. And then on the first night train from Vienna to Krakow, we were told that the attendant would wake us up. Like, don't worry, they'll knock on your door. Like, trains get delayed. They'll knock on your door. They'll make sure you're awake. And I was like, are you sure they're going to do that? Like, what if they don't? Like, what if they forget to wake us up? What if we end up in the wrong place? I was like super worried about it. So I had set an alarm, and my alarm went off on time, but the train was late, and I would have had like an extra 45 minutes of sleep. And ultimately, the train attendant is there to make sure that everyone leaving the train gets off the train. So they will make sure you wake up with time to pack, time to get ready, time to get off the train. Like, you don't need to set your own alarms. And I was told that in advance. I didn't trust anybody that told me that. So I'm going to pass that information on so that you cannot trust me the first time you experience this, and then the next time. So our second train, I was like, yeah, I'm not setting an alarm. I'll set an alarm for like 2 hours after we're supposed to get off the train, just in case. And yeah, the train attendant knocks on your door, make sure you have like hot coffee. They're great. And so we did have 2 different types of compartments. Our first compartment was the one that you see pictured here. The other one actually looks very similar, but our second compartment on like our second night train, we did get the shower in the bathroom. And while it was nice to have the bathroom with only 7 hours on the train and wanting to sleep as much as we could, we did not use the shower. So it wasn't really worth the extra money. It wasn't that much more expensive, but it wasn't necessarily worth the extra money. But that's up to individual preference. They do have a shower or a bathroom just down the hallway, and the bathroom down the hallway has a shower in it. Excuse me, I'm doing lots of talking. So that's a little bit about the night trains. Here's a video. I have I will mute the sound on these because I don't know what I'm saying in them. But here's some video that you can kind of get a visual of what the trains, I don't know if I can mute sound, so we might just have to listen to me talk. So this is getting on to the train. This is the hallway coming into the one without a shower. There's no shower compartment. This is our space. That's Rob proving that the bed's fit a human. And you have bunk beds. These beds do fold up into seats if you want them to. Like I said, we weren't on the trains really long enough to need that. But that is how much space you get in a compartment that has no bathroom. It's also really worth noting that these doorways are really narrow and the hallways are really narrow. We had backpacks and we were fine walking straight, but turning sideways with the backpack was like next to impossible. So that is the first train. And then this is our second one. And then this one, we had a bathroom compartment. And okay, we'll stay on mute. Probably full screen it. And then again, like the bunk beds, and these are all shot like up and down because the sideways you just couldn't see enough in landscape mode. But we had our bunk beds, and then each train gave us, like, we had a little like care package that had everything you would need to stay in a like basically a hotel. Here's our bathroom. It has a toilet, it has all the like sink, and then the amenities. They have like shower shoes and shampoo and everything, and this is your shower. And that's me. But they had care packages, and in these care packages, you had like the toothpaste and mouthwash and like all that random stuff that you could possibly need, as well as bottled water. Some of them had food, like crackers and poppers and stuff like that. So they had a lot. It was a really cool experience. As far as sleeping on the train, I slept just fine. Rob took the top bunk. Apparently, I can't be trusted not to step on someone when I get out of bed in the middle of the night. But I slept fine once the train got moving. When the train was in the station, it did seem really loud because you could definitely hear the people on both sides of you. This particular train compartment that had the bathroom had a like adjoining wall, adjoining door to the one next to it, so you could do like a family train setup. So you could definitely hear the kids next door to us, but once the train was moving, it was a non-issue. So ultimately, was the training worth it? I would say yes, definitely. We've done the train trip before. We kind of knew what we were getting into in terms of like spending time on a train. Having all that downtime to just like, well, we can't do anything but sit on the train and eat snacks and talk to each other or play games or listen to books or crochet or whatever. But like having that downtime really made the vacation aspect more vacation-y, even though there was some chaos around catching the right trains. And like I said in the beginning, the whole purpose of this trip was to see a lot of Europe and know exactly where we wanted to come back to. Knowing how COVID would kick everything in the pants, we might have done it a little bit differently. If we'd known that was our like 2 week trip we had, we might have done it a little bit differently, but anticipating more trips and knowing that eventually we'll be able to travel again. We do have a next time list, and we did get to kind of dabble in a lot of cultures and countries. And we did get to feel, you didn't visually see the change, but you could like hear the change and notice the change in like how people acted. It was kind of cool to not have to like go through customs and like still know that you changed countries. And while in the beginning we did have some train chaos, ultimately it was significantly less stressful than driving, mostly because driving in the United States would have been completely different, but driving between different countries with different languages and different laws, like, no thanks. Especially not like a whirlwind trip like this. And flying, you can't get to the airport and be like, oh, well, that airplane flight was canceled. Let's pick a different one. Like, it's not that easy. On trains, that's easier. So we also had the Euro pass, so we could get on whatever trains we want. We just tracked what trains we got on, and we could kind of bounce around and not have to worry about train schedules until the morning of, which was really helpful. So that's ultimately the whole train trip. I got this last little bit as me and what Adventure Feet First is. This was meant to be a trip to kind of kick off train travel, future like services offered for train travel in Europe. And then COVID happened, which I feel like is an excuse for everything, but I swear to God, it's reality. this is also a very real example of what train travel sometimes is. This is when we got to Krakow, well before anything was open. And then I also, in my sleep deprivation / it's too early to be awake / I had no coffee yet, forgot how to do math, and went to the ATM and did not convert currency correctly. So I ended up with, like, I still have an insane amount of Polish currency that I haven't used, because I would have had to eat out at lavish restaurants multiple times to like use that Polish currency. It was maybe $150, $200 in US dollars. So it wasn't that much, but like I didn't do my conversion correct. So I was just like feeling like an idiot, hanging out on the floor waiting for McDonald's to open so I could have coffee, because clearly I can't function without it. But that's just like a whole, sometimes things go like they're supposed to and it looks great, and sometimes you have a moment. So questions. If you have questions, I'm going to back out of this screen share so that I can see the chat room. I do see that there are some questions popping up on my phone, but they just started coming, so I'm just gonna unshare. So now you're back to my face. And I can't promise there's not gonna be a cat walking through. That's what they do.